Hey you, and welcome to lesson 10. Today we are going to cover the passive voice. What is a passive voice? When do we use a passive voice? And how to change an active voice to the passive voice. So are you ready? Let's get to it. So let's start lesson 10. Today we will talk about the passive voice and the active voice. What is the passive voice and what is the active voice and what are the differences? Now, the active voice is just, as you guessed it, more active. It has a subject in the sentence. The passive voice, the subject is removed and replaced by the object. Let's take a look. The gardener, let me just pick the right tool. Okay. The gardener waters the flowers every evening. So here we have, hold on one second, let me just, I like this color better. Okay, the gardener here is the subject. The gardener waters, this is the verb. The flowers is the object, right? So S for subject, V for verb, O for object. The gardener waters the flowers every day. This sentence is active, right? Why is it active? Because we have a subject, we have a verb, and we have an object. Now let's take a look at the sentence, what happens to it when we change it into the passive voice. The flowers, all right, the flowers, which was the object, became the subject, are watered by the gardener. So now the object of the first sentence, which was the flowers, became the subject of the passive voice sentence. The flowers are watered by the gardener. This is the passive voice. So basically, the form of the passive voice is we start with the object, then the auxiliary, then the verb in the past participle, and there you have it. The flowers are watered by the gardener. Let's take a look at another example. Let's just delete this and let's go to another example. Helen, subject, doesn't drink, verb, anything in parties. Helen doesn't drink anything in parties. So anything in parties is the object. Now let's change this. This is the active voice. Let's change it into the passive voice. Nothing is drunk by Helen at the party. So this whole sentence, which is a compound object, will become the new subject of the new sentence. So it will be nothing is drunk by Helen at the party or in parties. Who sells umbrellas? Who sells umbrellas? Who are umbrellas sold by? This is in the question format. Who sells umbrellas? This is the right question asking about the subject. Okay? Who sells umbrellas? The answer to this will be he sells umbrellas or she sells umbrellas. But if we change it to the passive format, it will be who are umbrellas sold by. So umbrellas is the object, will become the subject. Who are umbrellas sold by? Let me delete this. Okay. Now let's take a look at one more sentence. My mother doesn't paint the walls. My mother doesn't paint the walls. So my mother is a subject, doesn't paint. Paint is a verb. The walls is the object. Now let's make it passive. The walls are not painted by my mother. The walls are not painted by my mother. Now, let's take a look at the passive. Okay, first before we do that, let's talk about why do we use the passive. We use the passive when the subject is not important, but the action or the object of the sentence is more important. So we want to draw the emphasis onto the object. That's why we start with the object. Normally, we don't even mention the subject. Like, for example, the sentence is fine without even mentioning the subject of the active sentence. Like, for example, here, the flowers are watered. That's it. We don't care who waters the flower. We only cares about that the flowers are being watered. That's why we use the passive. We can add additional information and says who waters the flowers, but we don't care. We only care that the flowers are being watered, or the flowers are watered every evening. Same thing here. Helen doesn't drink anything at parties. Nothing is drunk. So we don't care about the subject. We only care about the result. That's why we use the active voice, the passive, sorry. So let's take a look at the passive voice and the past simple. The formation of this is we start with the object as usual. We start with the object. The object here of the active sentence, it would become the beginning part of the passive voice. Object, then we use the past form of the auxiliary, was or were, depending on the subject, and then we will use the past participle, verb 3. Now, if we make a question, we start with the auxiliary as usual, was and were, then the object, then the past participle. Let's take a look at some examples. First sentence is in the positive. The teacher corrected the mistakes. The active voice and then the passive voice will become the mistakes were corrected by the teacher. So here, again, we don't care who did the action because the emphasis is on the results that the mistakes were corrected. Why did we use were? Because mistakes is plural. That's why I said the auxiliary was and were is determined by the object, which the object of the active voice, which became the subject of the passive voice, which is the mistakes. The mistakes were corrected by the teacher. In the question format, did the little boy sell all the candy bars? Did the little boy sell all the candy bars? Now, if we change it to the passive, we don't care about who sold the candy bars. All we care about is, are the candy bars sold? So in the past form of the passive voice, we will say, were all the candy bars sold by the little boy? Were all the candy bars sold? That's what we care about, the result. Then we can add the little boy as additional information, but the emphasis is on the candy bars being sold. So again, we use were because candy bars is plural. Let's take a look at the negative form. Lauren didn't eat any apples. No apples were eaten by Lauren. Again, we use were because apples is plural. Last one is he didn't give the wallet. The wallet wasn't given by him. The wallet wasn't given. We don't care who gave or didn't give the wallet. All we care about is the action, the result. The wallet wasn't given. Again, we have to pay attention to the object. Wallet is single. That means the auxiliary will be was and not were because it's single. Okay, let's take a look at the passive voice and the present continuous. Anytime we have a continuous verb, we will always use being in the passive voice. Whether it's present continuous, whether it's past continuous, whether it's present perfect continuous, or past perfect continuous. We will replace the continuous form, the ing form, with being. Okay, let's take a look. So we'll start with the object, then because it is present continuous, the auxiliary will be a verb to be, am, is, or are. Being to replace the ing, and verb 3 to complete the formation. All right, let's take a look at some examples. Oh, and then the question form is, we will start with the auxiliary as usual, am, is, are, followed by the object, followed by being, followed by the participle form of the verb. So active voice, the postman is delivering the mail. The postman is delivering the mail. So this is the active voice. We put the emphasis on the subject because we care who is delivering the mail. If we change it to the passive voice, it will become the mail is being delivered by the postman. The mail is being delivered. That is what the emphasis is on. Okay, so you see here, the mail is being delivered. Why did we use is? Because mail is an uncountable. And with uncountable, we always use is. We never use are. Just like the milk is cold, we don't say the milk are cold. Uncountable nouns always take the singular form auxiliary. The mail is being delivered. So here, delivering, ing, because we are going to remove this ing, we will replace it with being, and delivered will be in the passive, the participle form. Always the verb is in the participle form when it comes to passive voice, and ing is always replaced by being. Let's take a look at another sentence. Harry Potter is measuring the room. Harry Potter is measuring the room. So we will change this. We'll make it the room is being measured by Harry Potter. So is, because the room is single, being, to replace the ing, measured, the past participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at another sentence. The coach is congratulating the team at the moment. The coach is congratulating the team at the moment. So let's change it together. The team is being congratulated by the coach. The team is, because team is single, being replaces ing, congratulated is a past participle form of the verb. Question format: are they opening the gifts now? Are the gifts being opened by them? Here we used are because gifts are plural. Okay, now let's take a look at the past continuous form of the passive. Again, because it's continuous, we will use ing, but this time the auxiliary is going to be was or were. So the exact same thing as a past continuous. The only thing that will change is the auxiliary will be changed from is, am, are to was and were, depending on the object. Let's take a look at the sentences. The boy was throwing the stones. The stone was being thrown by the boy. Was, because the stone is single. Being, to replace the ing. Thrown is the past participle form of throw. Let's take a look at a question format. What was he writing on the desk? What was he writing on the desk? Let's change it. What was being written on the desk? What was being written on the desk? Was, because it's single. Being, to replace the ing. Written is the past participle form of the verb. Okay, let's take a look at another question. Let's just, let's clear this. All right, let's take a look at another question. Let's change a tool. All right. Was the suspect dragging you? Was the suspect dragging you? Were you being dragged by the suspect? Now, why did we use were instead of was? Because you always takes are in the present form or were in the past form. We cannot say is. Here was the suspect, was here, because we're talking about the suspect. We're not talking about you. But if we change it to the passive form, then you will become up front and will be were you being dragged, because you is the object. Now it will become the subject. So the auxiliary will have to agree with the pronoun you. Were you being dragged by the suspect? Nobody was watching TV. The TV wasn't being watched by anybody. We can also say anyone. Notice how we put it in brackets because it's not important. In the passive voice, we don't care who did the action. Only we care about the action that was being done or that was done. We only care about the action. Who did it doesn't matter. That's why we use the passive voice. If we care about the action, then we will use the active voice because we want to put the emphasis on the subject. Okay, present perfect. passive. Now, present perfect passive, it just the auxiliary is going to change, and we're going to add been instead of being. So, okay, let's pay attention here for a second. If we have ing form, any verb in the ing form, present continuous, past continuous, present perfect continuous, past perfect continuous, we are always going to put being to replace the ing. Now, any perfect form, past perfect, present perfect, we are going to use been after the auxiliary. And the auxiliary will always be, well, for the present perfect will be have and has, and for the past perfect will be had. But make sure to use been, right? Let's take a look. So we have the object, have or has, depending on the object. If it's plural or singular, then we will use been, then it's the past participle. Question form will start with the auxiliary, have or has, then the object, then been, then the verb 3 or the past participle. All right, let's take a look. They have cleaned the clinic. They have cleaned the clinic. So here we pay attention to the people who cleaned the clinic. They have cleaned the clinic. Now, if we don't care who cleaned the clinic, we just care if the clinic was cleaned or not. So we say the clinic has been cleaned. The clinic has been cleaned. Again, we can put this in brackets because it's not really important. The clinic has been cleaned. Why have we used has? Because the clinic is singular. In the active form is they have cleaned it. But in the passive form, the clinic will become the new subject and it is singular. So the clinic has been cleaned. Another example, Thomas has written many books. Thomas has written many books. Many books have been written by Thomas. Why did we use have? Because books is plural. A lot of people make this mistake, right? A lot of students get confused when they convert. Okay, we don't care about the subject. If the subject is singular in the active voice and the object is plural, the object, which is plural, is going to replace the subject in the passive voice. Therefore, the auxiliary would have to agree with the new subject, which is going to be in plural. So always, when you change from the active voice to the passive voice, pay attention to the object. Is the object in the active voice singular or plural? Therefore, you would decide which tool or which auxiliary to use with it. Let's take a look at the next one. It's a question form. Have the police caught the man? Have the police caught the man? So man is the object of the active voice and it is singular. So we will use a singular form of the auxiliary and will be, has the man been caught by the police? Has the man been caught by the police? Last example, UPS has delivered the letter. UPS is single and letters is plural. This is the subject and this is the object. So the object here will become the subject of the passive sentence. Therefore, we will use have because it's plural. The letters have been delivered by UPS. Okay, now past perfect passive. Exact same thing. We will just add been after the auxiliary, and this time the auxiliary will be had instead of has or have, and we don't need to worry about single or plural because past is always had. Okay, so let's take a look. The brave men had defended the city. The city had been defended by the brave men. The little girl had broken the window. The window had been broken by the little girl. Had Dorothy solved the problem? Had Dorothy solved the problems? Had the problems been solved by Dorothy? Now, if it was the present perfect, it will be, has Dorothy solved the problem? And if it was in case of the present perfect, which we just covered a minute ago, it will be have the problems been solved by Dorothy because problems is plural. But we don't care about that in the past perfect because it's all had. had the problems been solved by Dorothy. Last example, those prisoners had robbed 5 banks. 5 banks have been robbed by those prisoners. Okay, now let's take a look at the passive voice with models. Quick reminder, what are models? Models are can, could, shall, should, will, would, may, might, and so on. Now, models are part of the auxiliary family. We must keep that in mind. So models are auxiliaries, right? What are the auxiliaries? Just a quick reminder. As we said, auxiliaries are be, do, have, and models. Those are the auxiliaries, right? So be are is, am, are, was, were. Do is do, did, does. And have is have, has, had. And then models, which are can, could, and so on. Now, with models, we are going to start with the object as always, and then the auxiliary, which is in this case will be the model, followed by be, followed by the past participle. So the only difference here will be is that we will add be and then the past participle form with the verb. Okay, if we are going to make it a question, then we will start with the auxiliary, which in this case will be the model, followed by the object, followed by be, and the past participle form of the verb. Let's take a look. Our English teacher may give an exam today. Our English teacher may give an exam today. So the exam is the object, which will become the new subject. An exam may be given by our English teacher. So we added the be, okay? After the model, we'll always add be. Let's take a look at another example. Joanne can give them some information about the job. Joanne can give them some information about the job. So some information is the object, which become the subject of our passive sentence. And there will be some information can be, all right, where is it? Some information can be given about the job by Joanne, okay? Some information can be given about the job by Joanne. So we just make sure that we add the be after the auxiliary. All right, so this will be it for today, guys. I hope you know how to make any passive sentences now. Don't skip the quiz, and I'll see you next lesson. Have a good one.